Beneath Rome, in a set of fortified vaults, sits one of the largest unbroken archives on Earth. Over 50 miles of shelving, some of it sealed for centuries. For decades, a persistent rumor has followed those shelves, that somewhere inside them is proof the Catholic Church already knows we are not alone. In 2023, a former U.S. intelligence officer told Congress, under oath, that the government was concealing evidence of non-human craft. The claim reignited a much older question, one people have been asking about the Vatican since long before Roswell. So did the Vatican find something? Did they hide it? Or is the real story stranger than the conspiracy? A 400-year-old institution that's been publicly, repeatedly, almost eagerly, talking about aliens the whole time. Here's the claim, in its most common form, that the Vatican Observatory, the Pope's own astronomy institute, has spent decades studying unidentified aerial phenomena in secret, and that somewhere in the apostolic archive sits a file the Church doesn't want the public to see. It's a claim that resurfaces almost every year, usually attached to a new insider. In late 2025, a British filmmaker claimed he'd been given rare access to the Vatican's secret archives to investigate historical accounts that might explain encounters with what he called otherworldly intelligence, and that the Pope himself might be preparing the public for first contact. It's a great story. It has all the ingredients: a secretive institution, a locked archive, a scientist-priest hybrid nobody quite trusts, and a church with a very public history of getting cosmology wrong the first time around. Which is exactly why it's worth checking, not tabloid to tabloid, but against the Vatican's actual public on-the-record statements. Because it turns out the true history here is almost more interesting than the myth. Let's deal with the archive claim directly, because it has an actual answer. When researchers pressed the Vatican's Apostolic Archive to search its holdings for anything related to extraterrestrial life, the archive's own prefect responded on the record. And the answer was blunt. There is no document in the archive that regards extraterrestrial life, and anyone hoping to find one should be dissuaded from undertaking futile and unproductive attempts. That's not a no comment. That's an archivist actively discouraging people from wasting their time, which is either the most convincing denial imaginable or exactly what you'd expect a real cover-up to say. Skeptics will point out the obvious. You can't fully audit 50 miles of shelving from the outside. That's fair. But it does mean the hidden file claim currently rests on zero documentary evidence, only on the fact that a very old, very secretive-looking institution could, in theory, be hiding something. That's suspicion, not proof. So if there's no smoking gun document, where does the rest of the rumor come from? That's where it gets genuinely interesting. Here's the part almost nobody brings up. The Vatican doesn't need to secretly investigate the question of alien life because it has been openly discussing it for over 100 years. The modern Vatican Observatory was formally established in 1891, a direct public signal that the Church wanted a seat at the table of real astrophysics, not a rival to it. That institutional memory matters, because 400 years before that, this was the same church that put Galileo on trial for saying the Earth wasn't the center of the universe. In 1992, Pope John Paul II formally acknowledged that ruling as a tragic mutual incomprehension, the Church, in effect, admitting it had once let theology overrule evidence. That history is the real engine behind every alien headline that follows. The Vatican Observatory has spent a century making sure it's never caught flat-footed by the universe again. So when NASA started confirming exoplanets, the Vatican didn't go quiet. It went on the record. In 2008, the observatory's director at the time, Jesuit priest José Gabriel Funes, gave an interview to the Vatican's own newspaper, L'Osservatore Romano, under the headline, "The Extraterrestrial is My Brother." Funes said it was hard to rule out intelligent life elsewhere in the universe, pointed to the sheer scale of the galaxy, over 100 billion stars in a universe of 100 billion galaxies, and said plainly that believing in alien life poses no contradiction for a Catholic. His caveat was just as clear. So far, we have no proof. In 2014, Pope Francis made the comment that's been quoted and misquoted ever since, that if a Martian showed up asking to be baptized, he wouldn't turn them away. It's routinely reported as some kind of UFO endorsement. It wasn't. It was a homily about inclusion, using an alien as the most extreme hypothetical he could reach for. And the pattern hasn't stopped. As recently as 2026, the observatory's current director, Father Richard D'Souza, told reporters that if humanity ever did make contact with intelligent life, theology would need to reimagine itself, because any such beings would still be part of God's creation. Another Vatican astronomer, Father Guy Consolmagno, has put it even more carefully. He's stated outright that neither he nor anyone he knows has any evidence extraterrestrials exist, while also arguing that nothing in Catholic theology rules the possibility out. Line all of that up, and a pattern emerges that's almost the opposite of a cover-up. It's 100+ years of Vatican scientists getting ahead of a question on the record in the Vatican's own newspaper. Precisely so, they're never blindsided by it the way they were with Galileo. So why does the Vatican is hiding something story keep coming back, when the actual record points the other way? Partly it's the setting. An institution that operates behind a literal walled city, that speaks in centuries rather than news cycles, and that still won't fully open every one of its historical archives to outside researchers, is always going to read as secretive, even when it's being unusually candid, as it has been about this exact topic. Partly it's the Galileo scar tissue. The Church spent 350 years being the textbook example of an institution that suppressed an inconvenient cosmic truth. That single historical fact does more work in the public imagination than a dozen open interviews from Vatican astronomers ever could. And partly, honestly, it's the astronomy itself. Every time a new Earth-like exoplanet gets confirmed, someone asks a Vatican scientist what the Church thinks, and the Vatican, to its credit, keeps answering honestly instead of dodging. Each honest answer becomes tomorrow's headline. Vatican believes in aliens, which is technically true in the sense that they don't rule it out, and completely different from Vatican has proof. So, did the Vatican hide proof of alien contact? On the record, the answer is no. There's no leaked document, no whistleblower with anything concrete, no archivist confirming a cover-up, only a formal denial, a century of public statements, and a church that has spent longer than any government on Earth openly wrestling with a question most institutions are too cautious to touch. But maybe that's the more interesting story anyway, not a secret. A confession, made in slow motion, over more than 100 years, that if we ever do meet someone else out there, the Vatican has already decided, on paper, on the record, that they'd want to know them, not hide them. What would change if that day actually came? That's where we're headed next.